Felicia Weathersby. I'll be hosting the event, and we're just going to go over some of what we will be talking about the agenda for tonight. Tonight we're going to discuss we're going to learn more about you guys and your experiences and what you're going through as a host or as a neighbor. And also we'll discuss policies and compromises that we can take over to City Hall to see how we could craft policy to work for both of us, the neighbors as well as the host. We have the messenger here, and he will be doing FaceTime Live. So if you have a problem with that, you need to know right now so we can, make an adjustment. Everybody still with it? Okay, so he'll be live on Facebook. Okay, we're live. All right. We are going to open up the meeting to Q&A. So we're going to go through everything. We're going to do a short video. We're going to do a background on STRs and the current policies. And then we're going to have Q&A. So please allow us time to go through the whole session before we open up. And we will have somebody walking around with a microphone for you to speak. Okay? Just a little background about myself. Like I said, I'm Felicia Weathersby, and I am a host for short-term rentals. I've been doing it for 4 years, myself and my daughters. I am a single mother. I have 3 beautiful daughters, and we started our business about 4 years ago. And I say we because it is a family business. I live in Hollywood, and I welcome guests into my house on a regular basis, and it's something that I really enjoy doing. I love meeting new people, and I love welcoming people to New Orleans because it's a unique city. I feel like we need to make some changes in policies that can help to regulate the problems that we have with nuisances of calls and the issues we have with guests. But I believe through conversation we can come together and work out something that will work for everyone. I work with my sister, I work with my daughters, and we work together to manage, operate, and host guests on a regular basis. And I didn't expect to come into this business and make it a full-time business, but now it's a full-time business, and it's something that we all enjoy doing. I hire the local carpenter in my neighborhood. I hire the local landscaper in my neighborhood. This is a community, this is what we do to help keep the prosperity in our community. I don't go and hire people from other states to come and do work. This is a local business, and we do business locally. I send my customers to local restaurants. I send my customers to the tours around town. I think that, this business is a local business, and I would like for it to stay within our community where we are taking advantage of the dollars that's coming through in tourism. I have a few people here. I have Penny. She's with the Alliance of Neighborhood Prosperity. Eric Bay would not be able to join us tonight. He has a family emergency. I also have Ashley Hakini. She's with Government Relations and with HomeAway and /BRBO. And I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Penny. And to me? Yes. She'll tell us a little something
about myself. I was going to do it. Okay. Well, I did this on today's Thursday and Tuesday. I shared with the Tremaine community. That's where my property is. I live in Tremaine. What I shared with the community was this: as an African American, I've known about short-term rental from a very early age in my life because we were not allowed prior to the 1964 Civil Rights Act on the public accommodations. We were not allowed or welcome into hotels, motels, restaurants, parks, or any place, any public and private place that persons so chose not to have people of color. So the way we learned how to travel is we started a network. The network was pretty much word of mouth. It's, for example, I would say to Joe, for example, we're going to Chicago. Do you have a place we can stay? Well, no, I don't have a place, but I have a friend who has a place. I'll get in touch with that person. Because that was the only way we could travel. And we did this, we didn't call it short-term rental. We called it having accommodations to stay when we visited out of town. I can remember as a child that my parents would get together with other families and we would rent a house in Waveland, Mississippi. Believe it, a black woman owned a house on the water in Waveland, Mississippi in the 50s. And we would go there for a weekend, a week. And that was our trip to the beach because we weren't welcome at any of the other beaches. So we had to create our own places to stay. Going forward, I learned from my parents that what happens with property is property allows you to have sustainability and it allows you to be able to have sustainable wealth that you can pass down to generations. And so I began as an adult in the early 70s buying property. I went into the Chemay area in the early 80s and purchased property. All of this was done in preparation for me to be able to prepare myself for my retirement years. I'm 70 years old today. I'm happy to be 70, okay? No, today's not my birthday. Oh. But I'm happy to be 70, okay? And if I didn't prepare myself for what I was going to do to take care of myself as I aged, I would be in the same situation that those folks who are talking about what are we going to do for people with affordable housing. I would be one of those folks. I don't know anybody in my age group that is able to live on Social Security. It's just not possible. Or a retirement, unless you retire from some large corporation. So my investment was for the purpose of preparing for my retirement and leaving sustainable wealth for my children. And I work very hard at this. I feel very passionate about this. But I also understand and recognize that my properties are in a neighborhood. I live in my neighborhood. I live where my properties are. I know all my neighbors because I've been there since the 80s. They are all part of this whole process. My gardener is a neighbor. My electrician is a neighbor. My carpenter is a neighbor. They're all neighbors. We live very congenially together. So just to tell you about me, when you think about the short-term rental owner, just remember Penny. Okay? All right. So, going from that, I'm going to turn it over to Ashley.
Yeah, thanks, Penny. Well, as she said, Eric Bay couldn't be here tonight. He had a family emergency, and so Felicia very graciously filling in that capacity. Felicia wanted to go over some ground rules, and I'm sure I don't have to tell anybody here if anybody's been to a council meeting. This is not that format. We really want this to be an informal and true dialogue. Look at what we believe is the more common story for short-term rental owners here. Typically, short-term rental owners get painted with the same brush, and there's a lot of misunderstanding and discussion about the type of people that engage in the activity themselves.
My name is Alex Ramirez, and I consider myself an ambassador. My name is Alex Ramirez, and I consider myself an ambassador.
Alex is an ambassador. Well, all right, I don't want to make you guys sit here while we try and work out the video, but if you gave us your email and your contact information of home signing, and we can send you a link. It's on Facebook, it's on A&P's YouTube page, which you can access by going to the Alliance for Neighborhood Prosperity webpage, and that information will also be at the end of the presentation.
I've seen Alex's video so many times I can kind of say what it is. What Alex is Alex's family is originally from Honduras, and his parents came here when he was before he was born, and they began working in the hotel industry. And his parents they shift differently, and so that one worked the early morning to midday, and the other one worked the midday to late night, so that they shift off after Alex was born to who was going to take care of the baby, because both of them needed to work full time. And they worked in the hotel industry for 25 years. Alex began investing in property in mid-city. When you see the video, it could be a little astounding to see from what the properties look like to what the properties have become. Also, there's a clip from his neighbor who has been in the neighborhood for some 45 years, who said that if it wasn't for Alex, he would feel like he's going to pick up his house and move it somewhere else because of the improvement of the neighborhood that has occurred since Alex has been there and working there. So that's pretty much the gist of what's in the video. But as Ashley said, we'll send it out to your email address. We have an opportunity to get it for yourselves. Do you need to person leadership? Okay. I'm trying to be Eric. This is usually not the part that I present. So if I'm a little bit hesitant in how I'm presenting it, it's because this is usually not my part. But if any of you all who know Eric is the president of our association. And I became involved with the association by bumping into Eric on the street, actually. I was doing some work outside my property. And I met someone who finally didn't think I was the devil reincarnated because I was too turned around. And so I became what I consider now a part of the A&P family, certainly a good friend of Eric's. The part that he talks about is how did we get here? What happened in terms of where we are today, where we have neighbors who are angry with neighbors, and what's wrong with the process, what's wrong with the system. Well, the system is flawed. When we first approached Conso early on, all of the things that we're recommending now were all of the things we were recommending then. We talked about density, we talked about clustering, we talked about block limits, we talked about the fact that there needed to be on-site persons in that neighborhood. And there's an issue that we feel as AMP is that there needs to be two kinds of licenses. One, a resident license, and the other is a non-resident license. And as a result, there would be restrictions on non-resident licenses. What I've seen in Tremay is that in Tremay, those folks who were actually operating in the French Quarter, they came in and immediately started buying up property in Tremay, out-of-town investors. So in my area, and when I say my area, because Tremay is rather large, but when you look at it between Rampart and Claiborne Avenue and Canal Street and Esplanade Avenue, we have just in that section, we have one out-of-town investor for properties. Something wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with that, okay? So what we're saying is that we want limitations on that. We want that an out-of-town investor can have more than 2 licenses. That's it. And that you have to be able to prove that you are a resident of the city of New Orleans by just your voter registration card and or your driver's license. We know for a fact that homestead exemption, that there are people who have multiple homestead exemptions. One of our elected officials had a problem with homestead exemption, having it in more than one place, and had to fix that problem. Another one of them had multiple donors, and they had 3 and 4 homestead exemptions. So when you go in to get a homestead exemption, all you do is go in and say, I own property at such and such a place. You don't have to show your driver's license, you don't have to show nothing to prove you got the exemption. We feel that to prove that you're a resident, you have to prove it. You can only have a driver's license in one state. You can only have a voter registration card in one city. So those, it's important. Can we do that, please?
Yeah,
We have some stuff, we got some more handout I'm gonna give you out, because I'm pretty much talking to this. I never follow the agenda that we're supposed to follow, so, I just never do what I'm gonna do. The first thing that I didn't talk about was the nuisance area. We know that they're bad players. We know that there are people that have, and this is primarily, you find those persons who are non-resident owners, where they have people who come in with large parties, and they have bachelor parties and bachelorette parties, and get drunk and throw cans out the front door. I had 2 doors from my property. I was sitting out on the porch, because I live by my property. I was sitting on the porch, and they had these guys 2 doors down playing beer pong. I didn't even know what beer pong was, but what they were doing was sitting in the front door, throwing their beer cans, trying to get it to the garbage can. And so I thought, this is not for real. They're not really going to continue to do this. They did. And what I did is went down and said to them, go pick up all these cans, go inside, and if you don't do that, I'm calling the police. And that's the way I manage my neighborhood. I'm not, yes, it's wonderful if you can call the owner, but if the owner lives in New York, he don't care what they're doing in New Orleans. But if you tell him you're going to call the police, you can get it stopped. For local owners, myself, I have a 24/7 number. I get calls all the time from my guests. And I think that most local owners, you're going to find that they're very attainable, very reachable. You'll be able to get to them. But don't hesitate. If you have a nuisance problem, where you have a noise problem, we're asking you, don't hesitate to be able to call someone to have that problem resolved. We're asking the legislation of the city council put in that within 1 hour that something has to be done about it. We're asking for increased fines so that when you are in violation, you get fine number 1, you get fine number 2, and fine number 3. So that's what we take your license. Okay? And what we're saying is that if that doesn't work, then we'll just get the meter pulled. You can have a party, but you have no license, and if you don't have no air conditioning in this kind of weather, ain't nobody coming nowhere. All right? So those are the things we're looking at for nuisances. Density, we're saying that we want to have STRs on a 2-block base. 2 per block. Thank you. 2 per block. Now, there's been a lot of questions about, well, how are we going to manage this? Because there are people who already have more than 2 in one. There's already more than 2 in one block. How are we going to manage that? What we're going to do is ask for the differences between the resident and non-resident owner, number 1, because it is just knowing the ownerships of that, the majority of owners is non-resident owners of short-term rentals. And so the enforcement will happen where we limit the number of licenses they can have. But the other thing is a license is not transferable. So if you move or sell the house, you can't sell your STR license with the house. That it becomes void, null and void, just as soon as the property changes hands. There's one other thing that's going on right now too, and that is that the safety and permits allow someone to go in with a letter on behalf of an owner saying, I give this person permission to do short-term rental in my property. And then that short-term license comes in the name of the person who has the permission as opposed to the person who is the owner. And I think that truly has to be looked at. If you just give me a minute to get through this, we're going to address questions. Okay. Proliferation. We're suggesting that, I think you all have this paper, we're suggesting that there be a cap on permits of 6,000. Currently, we have about, what, 4,600?
That's just for the temporary licenses, so it's probably closer to 55. I don't have the exact.
55. But this is only in regard to temporary licenses. Right, right. And now what about commercial? Commercial's one of the involvement.
You know, I've seen cities approach it different ways. Some cities will make restrictions for commercial licenses or non-owner occupied licenses or owner occupied licenses. These are just suggestions that we can come together and talk through based on feedback from the community, based on feedback from our owners and managers, and most importantly, based on the feedback that we've heard from residents and neighbors of what the actual issues are. And so there are a multitude of different ways that I've seen various cities approach this issue. Capping commercial is typically not one of them, but it's not unheard of.
And the other suggestion under proliferation is that there be a 3% of overall housing units citywide, so that there be no more than 3% of temporary housing, of temporary licenses. When looking at affordable housing, the area that's in affordable housing, we're asking that the increase in fees per night be 2% of the total lodging cost. And every single lodging be assessed a fee, which means that all the hotels and all the motels will be assessed a fee, which they currently are not. We're assessed a fee as short-term rental owners, but we feel that that fee is inadequate. So we said, let's increase the amount of the fee and then increase the population who's paying the fees. If you really want to address affordable housing. The last administration that money goes directly to the city. So it goes into the mayor's office, and then they in turn decide how they're going to use it. Well, the previous mayor decided that the Superdome needed some of that money. So I'm not sure about how that connects with affordable housing, but that was what happened. Okay. So what we're asking that through the legislation that comes from council, that this is very specific of how it can be used. This fee is for the purpose of affordable housing. We want to not only look at having persons be able to afford the house based on the amount of money that they earn, but that they have moved them into home ownership. And this has been done, and it's being done. I think Austin is doing a bond issue now.
Yeah, it's unrelated to short-term rentals, but Chicago has a short-term rental fee as well.
Right. But there's multiple ways of getting to getting that done. The next one is on streamlining collection and remittance. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so right now, the fee that the city of New Orleans assesses on short-term rentals is $1 fee per night booked. It's a really, from my understanding, an administratively burdensome fee to be able to collect and remit. It's a very manual process. There's no option to do it online. A lot of folks are having trouble even identifying which staff member at City Hall to help them with this, and so it's very complicated. We've seen a lot higher compliance numbers in jurisdictions where everything is online and easily understandable and easily accessible. It sounds intuitive, but government is sometimes slow to keep up with the best ways of executing these types of policies. So if it's online, if it's easy to understand, if it's easy to access, that's automatically going to get a higher compliance. That's what it asks about.
And then you go into the blighted.
Yeah. So the blighted property initiatives, we have so much feedback from local owners and managers here that didn't understand how they were being targeted in the affordable housing discussion, because a lot of the properties that they had used as short-term rentals were previously abandoned and blighted and for significant periods of time and required significant investments to bring them into a space where they could be habitable and be brought back into commerce. And so Savannah has something a little bit similar to this with regard to their historic properties. It's not without precedent, but for a city that has a 20% vacancy rate and still struggles with blight here, we thought it would be wise to incentivize people to invest in those properties by creating a special permit for them or allowing them to have access to permits that may not be accessible to people who want to use other properties, for example.
And that pretty much covers with what it is we want to present. This is ideas, okay? You have in front of you, it's a handout, it's the same ideas that I just went through with you. So what we want to do now is hear back from you and say, what do you think about this? Let's have a conversation about it now, about what is it you think?
We don't have microphones, it's such a small room, we figured we could speak up and just be heard. But, oh, do you have, no, you don't have to tell this.
Do you need a microphone?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's important, so.
Okay. I think he had his hand up first. Okay, you first.
Yeah.
And please remember 3 minutes.
Okay. I'm Reginald Johnson from the Gin City area. I just wanted to ask you, you're saying that you're gonna give these special properties, as you say, these blighted properties. So that means that you're still allowing these investors to come in and buy these blighted properties, and they get special privileges.
Well, the way we're looking at it is that they would come in and rehab the blighted property. They would be allowed a limited period of time to use that property for short-term rental, and then that period of time would expire. It could be 1 year, could be 2 years, could be 3 years. It's just a suggestion. We're just looking at alternatives to how could we get affordable housing available.
Well, could we possibly put this in, do 1 for 1? If they're gonna do 1 short-term rental, let's do one affordable housing.
Here,
You know, let's mix it in, let it be mixed use.
Okay. And please write down on your comment cards, because this is, as I said, a document in work in progress.
Right.
Yeah, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I just had a quick question. You said that the majority of homeowners of short-term rentals in New Orleans were out of state. Do you have a percentage?
It's not.
That's not accurate?
No, it's, the way that they're tracking it now is through the holder of the permit, and that person is typically an operator, and the operator may or may not be the owner of the home. So when you look at how many people hold permits, it's easy to say, okay, 40% of permit holders own, or, you know, a small percentage of permit holders own, or have half the properties. This doesn't mean they own the property.
So
they
the
just have
permit
the
owner could live in New Orleans and the owner could live in New York City.
That's right.
But they could also live in New Orleans. And I have a lot of property managers here that, that manage multiple properties for only local owners. So it's difficult to look at the way the city tracks it. In urban areas that are, you know, this size, we typically see more local owners than you would in like a Breckenridge or a Vail or a Destin for obvious reasons. But the exact percentages we don't have.
And remember when I said earlier that the process of allowing somebody to have the license in another person's name other than the owner makes it very difficult to track. So we really don't know.
Well, if you have an LLC who's an owner, you can just go to the Secretary of State website and find out who owns the LLC. That's public record.
That's it.
For the record, LLCs cannot apply for short-term rental permits. That's the other
Thank you
owner.
for clarifying that.
Good comment.
Yeah, so does the A&P have any firm position on commercial short-term rentals?
I really, well,
And are there any representatives here from like Stay Alfred or Sonberg, Domeo, or any of the large commercial SCR players? No representatives here? Okay.
no. And we are primarily a local organization. So, but we wanted, well, I'll tell you what Christian Palmer told me, because I met with him. I asked her why was the moratorium put on short-term rentals, short-term rentals temporary and not on commercial. And she said that she wanted to see the moratorium on everything so that they could get a handle on everything, but they acquiesced to Jason Williams because he wanted to have certain kind of buildings that were being built in the CBD and them to have the opportunity to recoup their investment And you can see the newspaper where the commercial buildings in the CBD advertise that they have multiple short-term rental licenses. So how do I feel about it? I can't speak for AMP, but I think it's crap. Just a minute.
I also have another question about this, short-term rental profile by the University of New Orleans. Do you have any information on the methodology of this survey? Like, where did you get your sample? Was that, like?
Well, it's not, I just read the study, I wasn't involved in it at all, but to my understanding, it uses a similar methodology that other organizations use when they estimate economic impact, and that is developed by the federal government, through.
But who are the 319 people who completed the surveys? Where did you get that, where did they get that sample from?
We have to ask you.
You have to ask them.
Well, I was just asking about the stacking of these units, meaning buying entire buildings and stacking, and that's not the way vacation rentals was set up in terms of the stacking of buildings. I thought, Airbnb and HomeAway, you use homes, not large office buildings that's converted to apartment complexes, and you're renting these out as Airbnbs. I don't think that was the perception of what Airbnb and HomeAway was. I don't know. Tell me.
That's not how they have marketed
I didn't think they ever marketed that way.
Reports came out today that it's a growth, commercial is growth.
Chicago, they're always homes, they're never buildings or complexes or whatnot. Personally, I see Mr. Swilling, Pat Swilling, that's a football player, he's building a building now for Airbnb, HomeAway, vacation rental, short-term rental.
And unless we have some singular restrictions on commercial development in commercial areas, there's nothing that can happen. All of this is driven through policy. All of this is driven through your council. So we implore you to fill out the papers that we gave you, because what we're going to do is compile all of this information to say, okay, this is what came out of the community meetings. This is what people are concerned about.
Okay. What you said earlier, there were, people who worked in the hotel industry, and they had to both work full-time to afford to live here. That shows how hard it is for residents to earn a living and live here. I'm a retired teacher. My kids are grown and financially independent. I can barely afford to live in this city. And short-term rentals just hike the price overall, because they just take living space off the market. It's a simple equation. I can't imagine anybody with kids. We hotel workers who serve all those tourists who come. How can they afford to live here? Musicians, that the people enjoy who come here. How can they afford to live if we take more and more housing off the market, so that a few people who can afford it make a huge profit?
Well,
that's what it really comes down
Let me tell you what city government did, okay? City government tore down 15,000 units of affordable housing units after the thing. They tore it down, okay? Short-term rental didn't have anything to do with tearing down those 15,000 units. And what did they replace it with? They replaced it with maybe about 2,000. So I, as a short-term rental owner and operator, the property where my property is, my property was never going to be considered, or has ever been considered what you consider affordable housing. I can't afford to rent where my property is, and never could, for $800 a month. I can't do it because my mortgage is twice that. Okay, so the problem.
I'm just talking rent in general.
Yeah.
The more you take off the market, the higher the rent is.
As a real estate agent, let me tell you that you're saying that the short-term rentals are taken off market. There are a lot of short-term rentals, but there are a lot of empty apartments. And the problem is rents are high. Rents are not high because of short-term rentals. Rents are high because mortgages are high, because our property taxes are high, because of issues that developed after Katrina. And so Katrina had a lot to do with it, tearing down a lot of affordable housing had a lot to do with affordability for apartments. And so people buy properties in order to try and be able to cover their note. Yes, rents are high, so a lot of those apartments do not fall in the affordable category. They are not affordable apartments. They're high, not because of short-term rentals, but because of other issues that the city has.
Can I ask what your policy recommendation would be? What would you like to see? Or what would you like to see?
To really restrict the expansion of short-term rentals, you know, and I wouldn't put the cap at 6,000 because that's higher what we have already, so that would be expanding it, that wouldn't be a cap. I would also really restrict how many rentals one single person can have, you know.
Do you know that we're Americans and we have rights?
Okay, well,
Oh my God,
Let's not go there, okay?
That's not good.
No, what I'd like you to do is not, you know what Eric would say if he were here, is that, what would you say to your council person? And your council person for this district is Jay Banks, is it not? And what I'd like you to do is, in the pages that we gave you like this, write it in for us. Put your name, write it in, and say, Mr. Banks, this is what I'd like to see happen. Because that's the only way anything is going to happen, is the council has to hear from their constituents, you or their constituents, what is it that you want in your neighborhood? And then that's what they have to support. Our concern has been, is that several persons ran on the platform of what they're gonna do about short-term rental. And they don't have a clue of what to do about short-term rental. Those of us who live in the neighborhood, have been operators in the neighborhood, or the neighbor of operators in the neighborhood, we are the people that need to be coming up with the suggestions of how that legislation ought to look. So, of course, we're Americans. Of course, we all feel we have certain rights. But you know what? My neighbor has rights too.
Exactly.
Okay, wait a minute. Let's get it in order.
I wanted to ask if you're certain that differentiating between these allowable property rights between locals versus non-locals is even constitutionally.
Well, from what I understand is that we currently do that right now. If you, for example, fishing permits.
This is housing.
Well,
Instead of fishing.
well, permits.
So,
Permits.
can I answer that?
Okay, go ahead.
So it's a really good question. There are constitutional concerns with mandating that the STR that you are operating is your primary home or homestead. There are constitutional concerns saying only residents can do it and nobody else can do it, which is why it's phrased very carefully to say that non-residents could participate, but they can't be banned from the activity. So that type of policy, if it was a homestead exemption policy, it has invited litigation in every single city that it's been introduced in. It typically drags out for years. It costs millions in taxpayer dollars. This was an attempt to try and find a happy medium between exercising some of those controls and limitations on the activity without banning it effectively.
And that's what I was trying to make with permits, that you don't ban the fishing license, you just limit how many fish you can catch, as opposed to a non-resident to a resident. We do the same thing as it relates to hunting licenses. This is a license. Your short-term rental is a license to do something. And all we're saying is that it's already been shown that there is a way to do this. And what we're trying to do is come up with a way that's livable for everybody.
I got one statement and then just a couple questions, mostly for Ashley. And this is done respectfully, Ms. Penny. When you said, you know, the council has to hear from us, there was actually a process that was approximately 9 months long, where there was a round with the CPC, there was a round with the city council, including the old city council, and that went through, and there was a collection of public commentary, and that was assessed and was made. A bunch of recommendations were made by the CPC. They were formed into an ordinance and presented to the city council. That was scuttled at the last minute, the day before, by Ryan Burney and Mitchell Andrew. So we've already gone through this process, and so I'm just trying to disabuse the folks in here about that, because we already went through that, but we got a lot of things.
Well, we got to keep going through.
Well, no, but I'm saying we did, and then Ryan Burney, who has a consultation company here in town, and Mitchell Andrew changed it. They put it in different ordinances. And, but I'm saying, yeah, we do have a new mayor.
Okay.
Yeah, we also have a new council member in District C. But I'm gonna get some questions from Ashley. With HomeAway, do you have, and I know the answer to some of these questions, do you have a way of tracking illegal short-term rentals in the French Quarter? And a way of assessing them? Because for the most part, they're not really allowed there.
I would have to understand more of what you mean.
Well, they're not allowed in I think they're only allowed in the VCE area. A small strip of Bourbon Strip and Bourbon Street, and then one little area between Canal and Contact. Do you have any way of tracking that? Because you are an online platform, so you deal with data that's transmitted online. So if you don't, I do have that information. So I have a screenshot. I got a screenshot on my phone.
So does the city.
Yeah, okay, good. And then the other thing is, has HomeAway, and also one other thing is, there actually is a hotel tax that is assessed to hotels. I think there's also $1 assessed to visitors. I think there's also a tourism tax that's applied to that as well. So there are taxes that are assessed and fines.
Are they dedicated to affordable housing?
I'm not too sure about that one, but they are. They're not. They're also, but they are assessed. And there's all and if there's a way to guarantee that, I mean, because you are private entities, there's not really a way that you can assess and make sure that that ordinance and that fund has gone through. As we've seen in the past, actually just this week, a lot of funds that are allocated for very specific purposes get moved around. So there's no guarantee of that happening. And then, has HomeAway given money or taxes that you've collected? Have you given that to the city?
Can I just compliment your multitasking?
She's feeding me questions. She does all the research.
No, it's a good question. We're actually in discussion with the city right now to be able to do that. Not many people understand the differences in platforms, and I won't bore you with the details, but when the original ordinance, as you mentioned, was passed, it was written in such a way that really only transactional and fully transactional platforms could comply with it. A lot of the platforms that were solely advertising platforms at the time didn't even have access to the data that they were requesting from us. So as our business model has transitioned since acquisition and through this process over time, we are becoming more and more transactional, and we do have insight into the information that would allow us to provide that service to the city. So we've begun beta testing those type of agreements in other areas, and as soon as we have the capability, we'll be turning it on, hopefully.
Okay, it's just interesting because we've had this in play for over a year now, and you guys have revenue of almost $500 million, so you might be able to find that money to beta test.
Well, the taxes are being paid on the homes, they're just not being paid by the platform on which those homes are advertised, because the activity is taxable. But it's certainly a service that we are capable of providing in the near future. And we'd be happy to.
Thank you.
Yeah, of course.
This is not a question, it's commentary. Is that permitted? I don't want to just cloud the air with more commentary. So affordable housing is obviously something that I think we all deal with. But, you know, Airbnb, we have, you know, according to AirDNA, Airbnb, everybody who's on HomeAway and on and on Booking and so forth, like they're mostly also on Airbnb, so I'm just going to use that as shorthand if that's okay. There's between 3,000 and 4,000 active units. So there's more permits, obviously, but there's between 3,000 and 4,000 active units. In the greater New Orleans area, there's 200,000 housing units, okay? So 3 over 200, that's 1.5%. How many vacant units are there? Many, many, many more. And how many people are buying homes? I think we all know at least one person who's bought a shotgun double, torn down the wall in the middle, and turned it into a single family home. Every time they do that, they destroy supply. They take supply off the market, right? So are we going to ban them? Are we going to ban homeowners from tearing down that wall and living there? Are we going to ban somebody who currently lives in a 2-bedroom home from moving up and going to a 4-bedroom home because he has a little bit more money? Like we're going to see if banning SDRs actually brings rents down. I'm not optimistic that it will. It hasn't done so in any other city where SDRs are not an issue at all, like, you know, Saskatchewan or whatever. Like, they don't have SDRs, but their rents are going up just as fast as ours or even faster. And the fundamentals of that are just that unemployment is low, people are moving up in housing, and in New Orleans, unfortunately, we have a housing policy prescription that's kind of like San Francisco. Building is forbidden. And so if you have the same amount of supply and you want more demand, then prices are going to go up, and that's going to happen whether we ban it or not. But don't take my word for it. Just see what happens in the next 24 months. It's not going to go down, I'm telling you.
Well, actually, now that you mention it, there was evaluation report for New Orleans in June of 2018. You can Google it, it's available online, and it does do a little bit of an overview of all the things that you're talking about. The market itself, how displacement is occurring, how certain pockets in certain neighborhoods are accelerating in price farther more than others, and they even look at short-term rental licenses. It's a very informative document.
Could you repeat that again?
It was a New Orleans, I think it's the real estate market analysis. It was conducted by a third party called Reinvestment Funds. They release it every 3 years.
It's not the one that was just published in the paper.
Totally different type of report.
All right, we can come in here.
So my question kind of tacks on to what he was saying. I am an investor, I buy blighted homes, I turn them into long-term rentals. And the only short-term rental I do is my primary residence when I go on vacation. And what I don't hear a lot of talk about is exactly what he was talking about. People all over the city buy a double, make it a single, or buy a quad, turn it into a double. Well, I want to do the opposite, but they don't let me do that. Like
No,
the
they do not.
policies in the city encourage you to downgrade the house to less units. I wish I could take a single family and make it into 4 units and have affordable housing. I can't.
Nope.
So I mean, is any discussion going on? I would love to be able to modify those policies that are preventing people like myself. Like, I would do that all day. I see a need in the market. I would have renters. I want to do it and I can't.
Well, you can if you find the right zoning and you put a sprinkler system.
Yeah, but everything now is HURD.
So,
To basically everything in the New Orleans city.
it's impossible.
Well, I can tell you, my property, and I live in Tremaine, I put, one of the properties is a double house. And what I wanted to do was separate the porches. And I bought this beautiful iron divider that I found at a flea market. And I had it, redid it myself, and then I had the welder install it. And so, 3 weeks later, I got a letter from the Preservation Society saying, it's not permitted for you to take it down. So I said, well, I'm gonna appeal because this is ridiculous. I just enhanced their property. Look, I went through 2 years. Guess what? It's down, it's in my backyard. And I don't know, I'm trying to figure out where I'm gonna put it, but I'm not gonna put it in the front yard because they're gonna make me take it down again. So,
But seriously, do you know if that's a part of the discussion? I really would like it to be.
I'd like it to be too, but it's not.
included in your comments.
Okay.
Including your.
I've heard it before, but it's not
It is
popular.
a serious policy that like the average resident is not aware of. But how many times have you seen a double turn into a single? Have you ever seen a single turn into a quad?
You
No,
know.
never seen.
There are plenty of older houses, I'm not saying, I don't have any idea when.
Yeah, they're existing. They're extremely hard to find. I look for complexes all day
There
long.
was a time in the city when the politicians didn't jump all over you, and you could do that.
Right.
So,
But that's long gone.
well, for sure, but it
Fire
obviously
code
works.
doesn't allow that.
There's no reason why, this can't be a win-win situation instead of people fighting over, I don't have a dog in this fight. I just wanna hear what people have to say, and I'm learning about it tonight. But, I own my house and it's a little tiny house and I can afford it, but, I know plenty of people that do wanna live in New Orleans, buy a little house, fix it up, and have income, like you. They might not live in that house, but there's a lot of people that are gonna make money in that situation. The host, the person that might clean it, the person that comes in and does plumbing work and all that, so it's really frustrating, but.
On the Tuesday meeting, my housekeeper said, and she came to the meeting, she worked in the hotel industry for many years, and she's been with me now for 5 years. And I didn't know this. At the Tuesday meeting, she said, guess what happened with me, y'all? I just bought me a new car, and I'm gonna have me a short-term rental. I mean, so that's, her wage, she's being paid a living wage, so she can do these kind of things.
I
Wait,
own-
excuse me,
Look.
behind you.
Behind me, yeah.
Great.
I'd like to comment on what he said. I guess the equating short-term rentals with affordable housing in many instances does not equate. I have property uptown which is a 7-plex, and most of it is rented regular except for 1 unit that's short-term rental. In the area, there is, if I if it is eliminated and it becomes a rental again, it is not affordable. There is nobody renting affordable in that part of town off of Magazine. This does not, eliminating short-term rentals in many areas does not, unfortunately, serve that purpose. Mine would be rented at market rate. And any person who is an investor is not going to rent at a much lower rate than the affordable rate. It's just now how people who work and put their money into it, which I have. I'm not rich, but it is a part of my income. So there would be no reason for me and other investors to take less rent than affordable. And they equate this with eliminating short-term rentals will give us more affordable. Many areas in town that does not translate, unfortunately.
Just another issue with this, with the stuff that went on in that process that ended sort of in October of 2015, nobody, any of the civic groups that were organized and discussing this ever said no short-term rentals at all. That was never on the table at all. No one ever said we want to ban any of these. We were talking about limitations within that. So a lot of folks that have pushed back against HomeAway and against Airbnb, they haven't said like get rid of them all. We've said like, you know, kind of live up to what you were advertising is that one or two folks or one person has a house and they rent out one or two rooms or one side. I mean, like Ramirez, that's the dude on you didn't see his whole thing. How many properties does he have? I mean, and then also you were talking this Penny earlier. You were talking earlier about the majority of folks that have short-term rentals from out of town, correct? So I mean, like, do we have some?
That's been my experience in my area.
Yeah.
So, and Ashley corrected me and said that that's not correct, because that doesn't exist for all areas.
But there are some, and I know this for a fact, in parts of the Treme, there are some folks that are short-term rental hosts that pack folks into like a one or two resident dwelling, and they'll just pack them in. They'll feel like, oh, this actually sleeps 10 people. And so they're doing it on their temporary.
And those are the things that I say as a neighbor, if you see it, report it, because it's against the rules. And what we're trying to do is come up with some workable rules, but we're also trying to say, as a community, we all have to be engaged in this. So if you see something that's a bad actor, report it. We can get rid of bad actors. And those of us, the bad actors aren't here tonight. They're not coming to these kind of meetings.
So can you expand on that? How do you get rid of bad actors?
Well, the first thing they have to do is be reported. All right?
To whom?
Well, we're going to ask for in this legislation or proposed legislation that there be a process that is done that within 1 hour so you are responded to by whom you call. So there's going to be like at a 411 or 911 or whatever number, give us a number so that we can have that reported. The other thing is that if that doesn't work, then you call the police. Because it's already,
I just want to speak up for a neighbor who has had imposed upon him in a quiet neighborhood with brawls hanging, people sitting on the porch drinking beer, looking at the neighbors, and I'm not even a native, as if, you know, I was the culture of New Orleans. I have to fight for a parking space on the street because they come with more cars than there's space for. But nobody asked me if I wanted my neighborhood to turn commercial. When they couldn't sell a house that they renovated a block away, they now have it as a bachelorette party, and they got half-dressed women wandering around the neighborhood, going to the bars and coming back. It's because they couldn't sell it for the price they wanted to after they renovated it. The people across the street, you know, but nobody asked me whether I wanted that. And now I'm the animal in the zoo, and I'm not even a native. I've owned my house for over 30 years.
What would be your policy recommendation if you
No STRs. At least talk to the neighbors or vote on the block whether you want to support this or not. It's one thing about long-term rentals, because we've had long-term rentals but you can hold those people accountable. You can ask them or train them that, you know, you park in front of your place only. Or, you know, you keep quiet after 11 o'clock at night. Or, you know, things like that. You have parties for Mardi Gras. Fine. Not uncontrolled situations with people coming in and out, who are visitors who have no sense of safety, wandering around the neighborhood.
Thank you. Please put that in writing on your comments.
I already did.
Okay, thank you. And just to tell you about parking, I just got a wonderful thing on parking. In Tremay, all the people who work in the French Quarter like to walk in front of my door, so I never have any parking. Yes.
I just wanted to say, it is my experience, I'm from New Orleans, I can't control my neighbors, whether they're long-term or short-term. We used to have long-term neighbors across the street who were horrible. I mean, I can't even get into it, and I had absolutely no control over those long-term neighbors. I had no recourse. I had no way of reaching the owner of the property. When I finally found somebody, there was no response. So and we live off the parade route. We are constantly not able to. We can't take our car away from our house during Mardi Gras. We have to either walk or take a bike. And I just know that that's the way it is. We're not going to have a parking spot if we leave. But I have never had the sense. I grew up near the Jazz Fest, and it was the same story there. I've never had a sense that I could control my neighbors or train my neighbors in any way, shape, or form. So maybe I just have untrainable neighbors. Put that on your comment.
Part of it was where you chose to live. You chose your neighbors. You chose where to live.
You don't necessarily choose your neighbors. If you move into a neighborhood and you're already there, and they migrate to the neighborhood, I didn't choose them. They moved to the neighborhood. We was at our neighborhood for 30, 20 years. The same neighbor, when we moved to a different neighborhood, was still our friend and our neighbor until we made it a short-term rental. Then it was an issue. But the whole time we were there for 20 years and moved and allowed them to come and live in our house, then they had an issue because it was a short-term rental. They also had an issue when it was a long-term rental. 3 times with 3 different tenants. 3 different tenants. They've always had an issue. They had a big issue because it's a short-term rental and it's nobody that they know. Our guests never put them in any situation, never combative. They're very courteous to them, speak good morning, good evening, how you doing, and then go into the house. Anything they do on the inside. We don't allow parties there. We don't allow any other outbursts or anything that's not within our restrictions. Allow that. We've never had issues with our guests as long as we've been there. And we have ample enough parking for them to park where they don't park in our driveway. And that same neighbor has had a complaint about, oh, the car is parked on the sidewalk even though it's in the driveway. So no matter what you do, you're gonna always have an issue with somebody.
There's an ordinance against that too.
But we're in the driveway.
Excuse me,
we're not in the
block. Excuse me, we have other questions.
Yeah, I was just wondering if there's been any talk of, like, say, a fee going towards a task force or somebody that you, like, if there is a complaint, if there is, you know, someone walking around naked in the neighborhood, they'll have someone they can call and that they will respond. I mean, kind of outside, but keep it outside of the police force, because obviously the police force has enough of their own problems they have to deal with to help regulate it.
Quality of life
So a
officer.
lot of cities will dedicate part of the license fee for the permit to
Right.
enforcement, and they have a number of different ways they do that. Code enforcement, they found in some cities, if they're only working 8 to 5, is not necessarily effective.
But
I think that's a really good policy recommendation. And while we're on that, y'all don't know how productive this has been for us. I mean, this is such a better environment to have this discussion than a city council meeting, so thank you. We would like to keep it policy focused. We love your stories, but we want to hear what your solution would be if you had the opportunity to make one.
I have a solution for the collection of taxes. Every 20th of the month, if you own a business and you have remit sales taxes, and there's hotel tax and parking taxes and general sales, there's no reason why they couldn't do that. And I know you can do it online. I still do it on paper, but you know, if there was cooperation.
Well, we can't do it online yet, but I do pay my
tax revenue situation and just be another line.
Put that on your comment card, we'll read this, and we have that in ours as well.
I have a question, I'm sorry, it's not a solution, it's a question about a policy that you're putting forward regarding protecting neighborhoods from oversaturation. Obviously, some neighborhoods are more affected than others. We see it as Treme, Barony, Bywater, a whole lot. I was looking at a particular block, the 1200 block of Thunder Nichols, which I believe you have several over there. We touched on this with the question, what happens with a new policy of say 2 per block for all the existing ones that are there? This particular block has 15 structures and 15 licenses.
Wow.
So what's gonna happen to those 15 licenses?
No, I don't have the 15
Well,
licenses.
14.
And I don't know how they could be, well, that can't be completely accurate because across the street of the 1200 block of Governor Nichols is the church.
Maybe
And
it's
they're
the
their entire
1300
block.
block, or maybe it's
They're
I'm
their
sorry,
entire
I'm
block,
not
so you don't have
It's
any.
just a sample of Treme. I just pulled 15 permits and 15 structures.
It's not.
So, but what happens to those other 13 licenses in this policy?
It's gonna have to be done, it's gonna have to be the decision, it's gonna have to be the decision of the city council. Do they wanna do it as with non-residential limitations?
But what are you
Do they
proposing?
wanna, we're proposing what you all proposed. This, we looked at, non-residential.
We've seen cities do it in different ways. There are a variety of ways that it can
Would it
be
be
done.
grandfathered in that?
Some cities have chosen to do that. Some cities have chosen a phase-out process. Some cities have talked about doing the lottery. But ultimately, based on the planning commission's feedback and the dialogue that council hears from y'all, and hopefully doing a deeper dive on the data and the actual facts and information that they have before them, they'll be able to reach a decision that
And you have
could
not
address
reached that
that.
policy recommendation yet.
I haven't. I think a lot of us have differing opinions on what we would like to see, but A&P, I think Eric would like to see all existing permit holders keep able to continue to operate at least
So
for a certain
grandfathered.
amount of time.
So the most impacted streets will stay that way.
Well,
But it's, again, this is a discussion, and this is an opportunity for feedback, and
this
But
is,
it's a discussion about policies that A&P is proposing that y'all are
no,
supporting.
the policies that ANP is proposing is what comes out of these collective groups. We've only outlined considerations, but the proposal will come out from all the discussion that's here. And information, I made a comment about information, and be careful about how you translate it, because what you just said about the 1200 block of Treme, because that's where I live, is totally inaccurate. But if I were not here to be able to correct that, you all would have this inaccurate information, because you can't have that if you don't have.
Do you not have 4 licenses on the 1200 block of Governor Nichols?
It doesn't have anything to do with me personally.
Do you?